Chapter 2. We went tiptoeing along a path amongst the trees back toward the end of the widow's garden, stooping down so as the branches wouldn't scrape our heads. When we was passing by the kitchen, I fell over a root and made a noise. We crouched down and laid still. Miss Watson's big nigger, Jim, was sitting in the kitchen door. We could see him pretty clear, because there was a light behind him. He got up and stretched his neck out about a minute, listening. Then he says, "Who dar?" He listened some more. Then he came tiptoeing down and stood right between us. We could have touched him nearly. Well, likely it was minutes and minutes that there warn't a sound, and we were all so close together. There was a place on my ankle that got to itching, but I dasn't scratch it. And then my ear began to itch, and next my back, right between my shoulders. It seemed like I'd die if I couldn't scratch. Well, I've noticed that thing plenty of times since. If you are all with the equality, or at a funeral, or trying to get to sleep when you ain't sleepy, if you are anywheres where it won't do for you to scratch, why, you will itch all over and upward of 1,000 places. Pretty soon Jim says, "Say, who is you? Where is you? Dog my cats if I done hear something. Well, I know what I's going to do. I's going to set down here and listen till I hears it again." So he sat down on the ground betwixt me and Tom. He leaned his back up against a tree and stretched out his legs till one of 'em most near touched mine. My nose begun to itch. It itched till tears come to my eyes, but I dasn't scratch. Then it began to itch in the inside. Next I got to itching underneath. I didn't know how I was going to ever sit still. This miserableness went on as much as 6 or 7 minutes. It seemed a sight longer than that. I was itching in 11 different places now. I reckoned I couldn't stand it more than a minute longer, but I set my teeth hard and got ready to try. Just then Jim began to breathe heavy. Next he begun to snore. And then pretty soon I was comfortable again. Tom, he made a sign to me, kind of a little noise with his mouth, and we went to creeping away on our hands and knees. When we was 10 foot off, Tom whispered to me and wanted to tie Jim to the tree for fun. But I said no. He might wake and make a disturbance, and then they'd find out I weren't in. Then Tom said he hadn't got enough candles, and he would slip into the kitchen and get some more. I didn't want him to try. I said Jim might wake up and come, but Tom wanted to risk it. So we slid in there and got 3 candles, and Tom laid 5 cents on the table to pay. Then we got out, and I was a sweat to get away. But nothing would do Tom. But he must crawl to where Jim was at, on his hands and knees, and play something on him. I waited, and it seemed a good while. Everything was so still and lonesome. As soon as Tom was back, we cut along the path, around the garden fence, and by fetched up on the steep top of the hill on the other side of the house. Then Tom said he slipped off Jim's hat off his head and hung it on a limb right over him. And Jim stirred a little, but didn't wake. Afterwards, Jim said the witches bewitched him and put him in a trance, and rode him all over the state, and then set him under the trees again, and hung his hat on the limb to show who'd done it. And the next time Jim told it, he said they rode him down to New Orleans. And after that, every time he told it, it spread more and more, till by and by, he said they rode him all over the world, and tired him most to death. And his back was all over saddle boils. Jim was monstrous proud about it. And he got so he wouldn't hardly notice the other niggers. Niggers would come from miles to hear Jim tell it. And he was looked up more than any other nigger in that country. Strange niggers would stand with their mouths open and look at him all over, same as if he was some sort of wonder. Niggers is always talking about witches in the dark by the kitchen fire, but when everyone was talking and letting on to know things about such things, Jim would happen in and say, "What you know about them witches?" And that nigger was corked up, and he had to take it all back to his seat. Jim always kept that 5-center piece around his neck with a string, and said it was a charm the devil gave him with his own hands, and told him he could cure anybody with it, and fetch his witches whencever he wanted, just by saying something to it. But he never told what it was that he said to it. Niggers would come from all over around there and give Jim anything they had, just for a sight of that 5-center piece. But they wouldn't touch it, because the devil had his hands on it. Jim was most ruined for a servant, because he got stuck up on account of having seen the devil and been rode by witches. Well, when Tom and me got to the edge of the hilltop, we looked away down into the village and could see 3 or 4 lights twinkling, where there was sick folks, maybe. And the stars over us was spreading ever so fine, and down by the village was the river, a whole mile broad, and awful still and grand. We went down the hill and found Joe Harper and Ben Rogers, and 2 or 3 more of the boys, hid in an old tankard. So we unhitched a skiff and pulled down the river 2.5 miles to the big scar on the hillside and went ashore. We went up to a clump of bushes, and Tom made everybody swear a secret, and then showed them how a hole in the hill, right in the thickest part of the bushes. Then we lit the candles and crawled in on our hands and knees. We went about 200 yards, and then the cave opened up, and Tom poked about amongst the passages, and pretty soon ducked under a wall, where you wouldn't have noticed that there was a hole. We went along in a narrow place, and got into a kind of a room, all damp and sweaty and cold, and there we stopped, and Tom says, "Now, we'll start this band of robbers and call it Tom Sawyer's Gang. Everybody who wants to join has got to take an oath and write his name in blood." Everybody was willing. So Tom got out a sheet of paper that he wrote the oath on and read it. It swore every boy was to stick to the band and never tell any of the secrets. And if anybody had done anything to any boy in the band, whichever boy was ordered to kill that person, and his family must do it. And he mustn't eat and he mustn't sleep until he had killed them and hacked a cross in their breasts, which was a sign of the band. And nobody that didn't belong to the band could use that mark. And if he did, he must be sued. And if he'd done it again, he must be killed. And if anybody that belonged to the band told the secrets, he must have his throat cut, and then have his carcass burnt up and his ashes scattered all around, and his name blotted off the list with blood, never mentioned again by the gang, but have a curse put on it, and be forgot forever. Everybody said it was a real beautiful oath, and asked Tom if he had got it out of his own head. He said some of it, but the rest was out of pirate books and robber books, and every gang that was high-toned had it. Some thought it would be good to kill the families of the boys that had told the secrets, and Tom said it was a good idea, so he took out a pencil and wrote it in. And then Ben Rogers said, "Well, here's Huck Finn. He ain't got no family. What are you going to do about him?" "Well, he ain't got a father," says Tom Sawyer. "Yes, he's got a father, but you can't never find him these days. He used to lay drunk in the hogs in the tanyard. But he ain't been seen around these parts for more'n a year." And they talked it over. They was going to rule me out, because they said everybody must have a family or somebody to kill, or else it wouldn't be fair and square to the others. Well, nobody could think of anything to do. Everybody was stumped and sat still. I was most ready to cry. But all at once I thought of a way, and so I offered Miss Watson. They could kill her. And everybody said, "Oh, she'll do. That's all right. Huck can come in." And then they all stuck a pin to their fingers to get the blood to sign with, and I made my mark on the paper. "Now," says Ben Rogers, "what's the line of business of this gang?" "Nothing, only robbery and murder," Tom said. "But who are we going to rob? Houses, cattle, or stuff?" "Stealing cattle and such ain't robbery. It's burglary," says Tom Sawyer. "We ain't burglars. That ain't no sort of style. We are highwaymen. We stop stages and carriages on the road with masks on. And we kill the people and take their watches and their money." "Must we always kill the people?" "Oh, certainly. It's the best. Some authorities think different. but it's mostly considered the best to kill them, except some that you bring to the cave here, and then you keep them till they're ransomed. Ransomed? What's that? I don't know. But it's what they do. I've seen it in books. So of course that's what we gotta do. But how can we do it if we don't know what it is? Why, blame it all, we've got to do it. I don't tell you it's in the books, don't I? Do you want to go by doing something different than what's in the books? And get things all muddled up? Oh, well, that's very fine to say, Tom Sawyer. But how in the nation are these fellows going to be ransomed if we don't know how we're going to do it? That's the thing I want to get at. Now, what do you reckon ransom is? Well, I don't know. But perhaps if we just keep them till they're ransomed, it means that we keep them till they're dead. Well, now, that's something like. That'll answer. Why didn't you say that before? We'll keep them till they're ransomed to death. And a bothersome lot they'll be, too. Eating up everything and always trying to get loose. How you talk, Ben Rogers. How can they get loose when there's a guard over them, ready to shoot them down if they move a peg? A guard? Well, that is good. Somebody's got to sit up all night and never get any sleep just to watch over them? I think that's foolishness, said Ben. Why can't a body take a club and ransom them as soon as they get here? Because it ain't in the books, so that's why. Now, Ben Rogers, do you want to do things regular or don't you? That's the idea. Don't you reckon that the people that made the books knows the correct things to do? You reckon that you can learn them anything? Not by a good deal, no sir. We'll just go on and ransom them the regular way. All right. I don't mind, but I say it's a fool's way anyway. Say, did we kill the women too? Well, Ben Rogers, if I was as ignorant as you, I wouldn't let on. Kill the women? No. Nobody ever saw anything in the books like that. You fetch them to the cave, and you're always as polite as pie to them. And by, they fall in love with you. And they never want to go home no more. Well, if that's the way, I'm agreed, but I don't take no stock in it. Mighty soon we'll have the cave so cluttered up with women and fellows waiting to be ransomed that there won't be no place for the robbers. But go ahead. I ain't got nothing to say. Little Tommy Barnes was asleep now, and when they waked him up he was scared and cried. He said he wanted to go to his ma and go home and didn't want to be a robber anymore. So they all made fun of him, and they called him a crybaby, and that made him mad, and he said he would go straight and tell the secrets. But Tom gave him 5 cents to keep quiet, and said we would all go home and meet next week and rob somebody, kill some people. Ben Rogers said he couldn't get out much, only Sundays, and so he wanted to begin next Sunday. But all the boys said it would be wicked to do it on a Sunday, and that settled that. They all agreed to get together and fix a day as soon as they could, and then we elected Tom Sawyer first captain and Joe Harper second captain of the gang, and so started home. I clumb up the shed and crept into my window just before day was breaking. My new clothes was all greased up and clayey, and I was dog tired.